of, that people police rather, always ask families never to entertain these criminal syndicates, but to contact police. But families almost feel that it's always better to actually deal with these criminals themselves and secure, the release of their loved ones.
Well, I mean, it's too much to ask families not to deal with these individuals directly, because most often families are under extreme pressure. They are being requested by this syndicate or these criminals to not contact the police, and that any attempt to contact the police will result in the killing of their loved ones. So it is not like the families, they have much of a choice to contact the police or not to contact the police. So they are being instructed by the kidnappers to not contact the police at all, and not to make any attempt or even to bring in any third party to the matter.
From what you know, Martin, do we have a unit, or at least groups of police people around the country, police officers around the country, who are capable and well equipped to deal with this particular phenomenon?
Well, we read from sources, and I think from what Sean Agnet, I think one of the pioneer kidnappers in this region, a negotiator of hostages in this domain, has actually said is that about 365 SAP members who are trained to carry out hostage negotiation, which are the individuals who should negotiate directly with hostage takers. But whether this is enough, I think it's a question that research has to answer, because if you look at the number of kidnappings in South Africa, for example, it is so high that you are not sure whether the current police capacity, if at all the 365 are still there, whether they can really cope, to negotiate the thousands of cases that we have each year in South Africa. From every indication, this is not really possible. But negotiation is not the only response, and negotiation should not be the only response to kidnappings. I think it's a very complex matter that requires, multi-dimensional responses to the issue. And therefore, even if you were to have 1,000 hostage negotiators, that itself might not be sufficient to really mitigate the impact of kidnappings in South Africa.
Well, as a security expert, given everything else, like, for example, the fact that a lot of specialized units have been destroyed over time, given also the fact that from what many analysts have been telling us over the years, the South African Police Service hasn't really moved, hasn't gotten better from the days all that it knew was to kick people around and demand that they speak the truth, even though there was no truth to be spoken. So, do you believe the claim that we do have these 300 and odd highly trained and well-equipped people who can actually handle this phenomenon?
Well, as I said, look, I think from every indication, the analysis we see so far, and even based on evidence, is that in the past years or so, in the past 10 years, the police has lost a significant capacity to be able to respond to crimes in South Africa. And therefore, this is one area where it is difficult to really measure the capacity that the police has to be able to respond effectively to the issue of kidnappings. If you were to take, for example, the increase in kidnapping itself indicate that the responses have not been up to the task. Take, for example, in 2001, there were about 3,550 kidnappings. If you look at the number in 2014, 2015, when the police actually stopped providing statistics on kidnappings, the number was about 4,250 kidnap cases. This is by far, something which indicates that South Africa is still very top in the league of countries with a high number of kidnappings. And therefore, it means that there is the lack of capacity on the side of South Africa to be effectively deal with this issue. To also give credit to the system, you will recall in 2014 when the government adopted some very draconian policies relating to immigration, relating to kidnappings also, which indeed helped to bring down the figures in the post-2015 period. But the figures, I read some statistics showing that 10,000 kidnappings take place in South Africa. That's, for me, exaggerated. But what this tries to tell us is that the figures are still extremely very high for the government, and South Africa is still classified or ranked among the top 10 countries in the world with that's very chronic figures of kidnappings.
Now, Martin, if police have not been up to the task, as you have just said, and if, as you said earlier, it is a big ask to say to families, don't cooperate with these criminals, what options then do people who fall prey to these people have?
Yeah, let me answer that first with this preface. I think when you said, yes, the police have not, I think we look at it purely in terms of numbers. And I think if we do that, we are really deceiving ourselves, because to quantifying kidnapping is always very difficult, because even when people say not all kidnappings are reported, that's true, but we don't still know what percentage, what proportion of kidnappings are reported and which ones are not reported. So we will never be able to estimate. Probably the numbers are declining significantly because we stay with the assumption that there are more taking place out there and they are not reported. There could also be a situation where kidnappings are not actually they are not being committed around the country, and therefore they are not also being reported. Because I think the South African press has become very robust in the sense that many of these kidnappings are reported, and therefore we can have a fair figure of the number of kidnappings that are reported. But we also know that there will always be a number of kidnappings cases that are not reported in South Africa. It's a phenomenon that we've seen everywhere in the world. So South Africa is not the only case where we have a high proportion of kidnappings or kidnapping incidents which are not reported. But to respond, yes, please go ahead. I wanted to respond to the other aspect of your question, but maybe you can repose it again.
Okay, no, I think let's leave it there for now. We've run out of time, Martin. Thank you very much for your time. Martin Iwi is from the Institute for Security Studies on that worrying phenomenon where there has been a spike in high-profile kidnappings.